Hi everyone, I'm David Weber, broker and operating manager of State Property Management, proudly serving Orlando and the greater Central Florida area. If you're a landlord, one of the more frustrating and frankly confusing issues you'll face at some point is this. What do you do if a tenant wants to break their lease early? Maybe they've had a life change. Maybe they just want out. Maybe they're already gone without saying a word. Whatever the case, how you handle it can make a huge difference, both legally and financially. In this video, I'll walk you through exactly what to do if a tenant breaks a lease or threatens to, including when it's legal, when it's not, what your realistic options are, and how to protect yourself moving forward. Quick disclaimer up front. I'm not an attorney, and nothing in this video should be taken as legal advice. We do use attorney-prepared lease agreements for every property we manage, and we work closely with legal counsel, and you should too when the situation calls for it. All right, let's get started. The very first step is simple. Review the lease. Your lease should be your roadmap. If you're using a strong, attorney-prepared lease like we do, it will outline exactly what happens when a tenant wants to break the lease early, including whether early termination is allowed, what the required notice period is, whether a fee applies, like 2 months for rent, for example, and what the tenant's obligations are until a new renter is found. If your lease is vague or doesn't address early termination at all, you want to proceed carefully and consider tightening up your language for future leases. Next, does a tenant actually have a legal right to break the lease? In Florida, there are a few specific situations where a tenant can terminate a lease without penalty. These include military deployment under the Service Member Civil Relief Act, unsafe or uninhabitable conditions that aren't being addressed, landlord harassment or unlawful entry, certain domestic violence protections. If one of these situations applies, and the tenant provides proper written documentation, they may have a legal right to move out without penalty. If not, then you're likely dealing with an unauthorized lease break, and that puts the responsibility back on them. And again, if you're unsure, always consult with an attorney to make sure you're acting within the law. Once you know what your lease says and whether the tenant has a legal justification, reach out and start the conversation. Stay calm and professional. Ask, why are they leaving? When do they plan to move? Are they willing to help find a replacement tenant? Are they aware of the early termination fee or lease obligations? Sometimes just opening the door to respectful communication is all it takes to avoid a legal mess and keep things civil. Now, if the tenant has stopped communicating or is behind on rent and won't leave, you might consider a strategy we've used in certain cases. It's called cash for keys. Here's how it works. You offer the tenant a small cash incentive, say $500, to vacate the property by a specific date, turn in the keys, and leave the home in decent condition. At first, it might seem strange paying a tenant to leave, but in many cases, it's faster and cheaper than filing an eviction, paying court fees, losing another month of rent, or repairing damage caused by a hostile departure. It doesn't work in every case, but when done correctly with proper documentation, it can be a smart business decision. Now, if you're watching all this and thinking, this is stressful, I don't want to deal with this, you're not alone. At State Property Management, we've handled hundreds of early lease break situations, and we take a professional, legal, and efficient approach every time. We use attorney-prepared lease agreements, clear early termination clauses, thorough documentation, and a team that knows how to balance tenant relations with owner protection. Whether it's working out a termination agreement, releasing the unit quickly, or coordinating with legal counsel, we've got you covered. If you'd rather have a team do this for you, visit www.managecentralfloridaproperty.com and schedule a free consultation. Once you've gathered the facts and spoken with the tenant, it's time to decide how you want to proceed. Here are your main options. Number 1, enforce the lease if your lease has a specific early termination fee or holds the tenant responsible for rent until the unit is re-rented. You can enforce that. Just remember, in Florida, you do have a duty to mitigate damages, which means you can't just let the unit sit empty. You need to actively try to find a replacement tenant. Number 2, negotiate a mutual exit. Sometimes it's just easier to work out a deal. That might include waiving the fee in exchange for early possession, agreeing to a partial payment, having the tenant help with marketing or showings. This can be a win-win, and it avoids escalation or legal action. Option 3, hold them accountable for damages. If the tenant walks away with no agreement and you lose money due to vacancy or repairs, you may need to pursue the balance through collections or small claims court. Make sure you document the date they vacated. Track your marketing efforts. Record your re-rental timeline. Take photos of the property condition. Keep all communication in writing. Again, an attorney can advise on the best course if it reaches this point. And finally, once everything is resolved, take the opportunity to review your process and protect yourself going forward. Ask yourself, does my lease clearly explain early termination? Am I screening tenants thoroughly? Do I have a professional process for documentation? Should I be using an attorney-prepared lease instead of a template? At State Property Management, we help our owners avoid problems like this before they ever happen, with solid lease language, consistent communication, and professional oversight. Having a tenant break a lease can feel like a nightmare, but it doesn't have to be. With the right approach, you can protect your investment, minimize vacancy, avoid legal risk, and keep things professional. If you'd rather not handle all this yourself or just want to know your lease is solid and your property is protected, give us a call. Visit www.managecentralfloridaproperty.com to book a free consultation. And don't forget, if this video helped, go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss future videos. I'm David Weber, broker and operating manager of State Property Management. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.